Welcome and thank you for joining us for our daily learning. Today is Memorial Day, so may the learning we're doing be in memory of all those who have given the ultimate measure of sacrifice for our country and those who fell in the line of duty, whether it's World War II or any other war. May the learning be a blessing to their memory. The psalm we're going to learn today is Psalm chapter 8. And it is very famous in its own right. It is Psalms chapter 8, written by King David, and it goes as follows. So David always introduces the psalm with some kind of understanding of where it was said and what context it was said. So this is a psalm that was said. It says Al Hagitit. And what is the meaning of that? There are two explanations. One is that a gitit is a kind of musical instrument. And so this is this psalm was said with this specific instrument called a gitit. Another understanding is that it was said in a place called Gat, a very famous place. It was actually controlled by the Philistines. So that's another explanation, that this chapter was said in the place called Gat. Now, it addresses, the overall theme of this chapter addresses the idea that many have that human beings are just another creature, that human beings are just another part of the landscape of Earth rather than a distinctly unique creature. And so it's that the psalmist, King David, is coming to address and say really that human beings are unique in many ways. So he starts off and says, very powerful and strong words, Hashem Adonenu, God our Lord, how great is your name in the entire earth? And the reason your name is great on earth is not just because of what's going on earth, but because what happens in the sky. You look at the sky and it's just absolutely magnificent. You look at the universe, the stars, the galaxies, just stunning. And so from what we see in the heavens, we can infer God's glory on earth. If you take a look at what's going on in the heavens, then you really can appreciate God on earth. It's also always a joy to have Josh with us, but I do appreciate everyone that's here. So basically what he's saying is, if you take a look at what God is doing in the universe, in the skies, in the galaxies, then you know what God is, how glorious God is on earth. Now, the next verse is extremely famous and is actually probably one of my most favorite verses, if not the most favorite. He goes on and he says, from the mouth of little babies just when they're born, and babies that are just still nursing, that is the source of strength. That is the source of strength. And there are many ways to explain that, but the idea is that with no education, there's no future. If you want to look at the strength of humanity, you got to look to babies, you got to look to children, you got to look to the future generation. And it's interesting, if you look at a giraffe, an elephant, or any kind of animal, it's pretty quick, the time that goes between them being born and their ability to carry themselves and care for themselves. Human beings are the least quick to develop. I mean, a human being, it's years, right? Sometimes 10, sometimes in modern age, it's till they're 30. They finish high school, college, graduate school. But physically speaking, a human being at the age of 3 is completely helpless and unable to care for themselves. And there's no such other creature. And yet this is, thank you for the input. This is the strength of humans. Human beings, despite being the weakest species in the sense that we are the weakest and most vulnerable creatures when we are young, we are still the creature that dominates the universe, which is something you would never expect. You'd never expect the weakest creature to be the strongest one. And so King David says the beauty of this speaks to the glory of God. The fact that the most vulnerable creature, the most weak creature, is the one that's able to then rise and dominate the universe, that itself speaks the glory of God here on earth. And he says, Leman tzorerecha, those who claim that God is not present on this earth, need to look no further than babies and the way they develop and grow and become, the amazing creature that we know they are. And that is something that is going to, and I'll explain in a second why it's a favorite. And that is something that is, it counters any kind of enemy or anyone who's seeking revenge. Now, why is this so important? Because it speaks to the incredible importance of education. Some schools have this as a sign when you enter. It's actually a very popular verse among Sephardic Jews. You want to know where the strength is. You want to know where the greatest power of a people is. It's in the little helpless children, the ones that are just growing, just learning how to speak. That is where it's at. Because if you ignore that, you're never going to succeed as a nation. If you do not educate people from a very young age, from even the age where they're completely helpless and unverbal babies, that is the place you start. And that is the place that is not only the source of our strength, but that is something that is going to not only is it going to strengthen you, but it's going to make you outdo all your enemies. If you focus on your children, if you focus on education, that is going to be the source of your strength overcoming your enemy. And it's interesting, in the context of sort of geopolitics, countries that graduate their kids, let's say at 6th grade, have very, very mild armies. Countries that graduate their kids at 8th have stronger armies. The stronger our educational system is, you would think, well, maybe those kids are not, militarily fit, etc. No, the more you educate your people, the stronger your nation is. And that's true physically, but it's also true spiritually, especially spiritually. You educate your children, you focus on young people, you teach them values, you teach them to love peace, to love learning. That in and of itself is going to make you shine and outdo anyone else. And the next verse is a verse that is translated into English. I forgot on what very famous world landscape it appears, but it is extremely famous. And King David, I'm going to translate it. He says, God, if I see your sky, the skies that were created by you, and I don't recall where this is, but it's a very famous landscape. As I see your sky, the skies created, the craft of your fingers, it is the moon and the stars that you have created. What is a human that you shall remember? So just before we speak about the humility of mankind, what you need to look at is the fact that he says, when I see the stars, when I see your skies, when I see the moon, the stars, that I know is your glory. And that is when I sort of get humble and I ask myself, wait, why do you look at human beings? God, why do humans even matter? I mean, if you look at the universe, if you look at the entirety of the galaxies and the eternal years of light that you can travel, why is this little creature so tiny even important to you? God, why do you even look at this creature? And that's why this verse with this chapter is so important, because King David is really addressing those who diminish the importance of the human being. And yet he goes on to explain why humans are so important. Why is it that God looks at humans when there is such a vast galaxy, when there is such a vast world? He says, the reason is because God is a small creature in the image of God. And you shall give him glory and splendor. And if you go to the next verse, it's really something that you can only see in a way in this generation. You make him in charge of your creation. And everything you have placed under his feet. It's interesting. Take a look, if you'd be an alien observing the universe from outside, and you'd be looking at all these different galaxies, all these different stars, all these different planets, you see one Earth that has life on it. On Earth, there are millions of creatures, and you would see that little creature suddenly launch a satellite, a mission into space. This little tiny creature is able to dominate the entire creation. So sheep, cattle, the gamba motzadai, and even animals of the field are all subject to the abilities of the human being. Tzipor shamayim udgeayam, the birds in the sky and the fish in the ocean. And he has the ability to cross the oceans. And then he finishes, God, how gracious, how amazing is your name in the entirety of earth. So this is one of the most phenomenal chapters in Tehilim, where King David goes to contrast the fragility of humans with the incredible achievements that they have, the vulnerability of babies and little children, and yet the recognition that it's educating them and caring for them that is the ultimate source of strength and best argument for the belief in a God that cares and cares about humans more than anything else, because that is the source of the greatest force in the universe. So that is this chapter, and it teaches us really about God's involvement and care for everything that's going on with us. I appreciate everyone taking this holiday to be with us, and God willing, hope to continue tomorrow with chapter 9. Thank you so much for joining, and may these words be a memory for all those who have fallen in the various wars.